Hey everyone, today we're going to look at Psalm 61, so grab that, have a read and come back. Psalm 61 is without a doubt one of my favourite psalms, and it's probably because I am simply really familiar with it. Over 20 years ago now, my really good friend Matt wrote a song based on this psalm, and I've been singing it since. I've got a cover of it which I'll link to on Facebook and on YouTube so you can have a look yourself. Some of you no doubt would have heard me play it. It's called Under Your Wings. But this psalm is also a favourite because it expresses some great things. It teaches us some things about how we can pray, particularly when we're distressed, and some things about why it's good to do just that. At the very start of the psalm, you can see the psalmist starts off calling to God from the ends of the earth. Or in the song, it's expressed, far from home I call to you. In a world where God is known to dwell in the temple in Jerusalem, here's a guy writing this who is either physically or mentally far from home, far from Jerusalem, and therefore far from God. Whether he was physically far from home or just feeling far from God's presence, we don't know. But either way, he was calling out desperately for God to pay attention to him from a place that seems far away. Not only is the psalmist far from home, but if you read on, you'll see that he's crying out as his heart grows weak. He's sinking. He's completely overwhelmed by the things going on in his life. Maybe that's how you're feeling at the moment. He's drained of energy. He's in despair. And in his despair, though, he cries out to God. And that's what we can learn from this. What does he cry out? He cries out from in his physical and his spiritual exhaustion that God would take him to a place that he can't reach alone. That's in verse 2. From the ends of the earth, he says, I call to you. I call as my heart grows faint. What? Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. In other words, lead me to an inaccessible place, a place that he can't reach on his own. But what does that mean? Read on it. Look in verse 12. He says, I long to dwell in your tent forever and take refuge in the shelter of your wings. He wants to be the place where God is, God's tent. Under the shelter of God's wings. That is a place of protection. The old story about the farmer who was walking around after a fire had gone through his property. As the embers cooled, he was walking over the ruins and he noticed a burnt lump on the ground and he gave it a bit of a kick. And he saw that it was a hen that had burned to death. But as he kicked it, he also saw to his surprise that 3 baby chicks ran out. The hen had died protecting her young. That's what it means to be under God's wings, to be protected from the devastation surrounding you. He goes on again to pray in verses 6 to 7. Increase the days of the king's life, his years for many generations. May he be enthroned in God's presence forever. Appoint your love and faithfulness to protect him. He's praying for the protection and the eternal rule of the king. Why? Because then in verse 8 he will be able to ever sing in praise of God's name and fulfill his vows day after day. There's all this temple language going on. It's the same kind of idea expressed earlier, the desire to be close to God, but it's also talking about a promise that God had made to set up his king on the throne forever, who would rule forever and bring justice to the world. And this will happen, the psalmist says, when God sees his forever king on the throne. And the king we know is Jesus. Because of him, we can draw near to God. We can be sure of God's protection and presence. If we trust in him, we will ever sing the praises of his name.